I'm John Stanton, editor of Gambit, and we are back for another Get Down interview at the R Bar. Thanks very much to R Bar once again for hosting us, and I am joined by Aimee McCarron, one of our council members. Thank you very much for coming on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, happy to.
So you are our first term council member that we've had on. What's it been like the first 6 months?
Well, needless to say, it's been crazy. Lots of, things that were not on my bingo card, obviously. But it's been awesome. Like, I am excited. I love it. I mean, this is definitely where I'm just meant to be. And so it's been going really well for me.
And you have a unique kind of background a little bit, because you were a staffer on the council for a long time. And obviously that gives you insights into the job, but what are like some of the things that like you didn't expect, I guess, even sort of knowing what you knew going in?
I think the things that I didn't expect were just how everything, I know how everything works, but the daily decisions and things that you have to do, like the number of emails that I receive. I got them obviously as staff, but I was budget and policy director, so it was not the same amount that Joe got, obviously. And so just the sheer amount of emails, and then also a big percent of them are sewage and water boards things, which I guess we all knew was a problem, but to understand the extreme amount of issues that sewage and water board has through email has been just completely eye-opening.
Has there been one thing that is been the most difficult or the most surprising, you think, that you've dealt with, other than maybe the obvious Liz Miro, Jeff Landry situation?
Yeah, I think it's just working through the sewage and water board stuff up to this point. Obviously, August 1st is coming up, and we have some legislation that we're going to be working on that'll give the council more oversight. But I think that's been the most frustrating thing up until now, is that we haven't been able to really actually make any changes. We've been pushing them to do things for constituents that when we get an email and they're like, this has been 100 and something days, can you help out? But that's been the most frustrating, I think, is to not have that tool up until now. And even going forward, it's going to be not a push of a button. It's going to take some time to go through it. But I think the people in the city want this change. They trust the council and this new administration to kind of work through it. And I'm really excited about that part of it.
Why don't you walk us through the bill that you came out, I guess, this week with, sort of what it does and what people can expect?
Yeah, so this is the initial governing ordinance, essentially. So we were given the powers by the state. That happens on August 1st officially. And then this ordinance, which we are going to be hearing in committee on Thursday, kind of walks through and lays out via ordinance what our powers are. So it's going to give us the control over their budget, over their capital budgeting that we can approve or amend. It'll give us oversight on how they actually put those things together. We will make some changes to the board structure. We're gonna appoint a new board, and then eventually the goal is that board via charter amendment will go away, and then the long-term goal is that we will filter in sewage and water board into a city department. So this just kind of starts out the initial groundwork. We're gonna have a order an audit of their financials, look at compensation studies, and do a couple other things on Thursday to kind of set the ball rolling. And then going forward, we'll just work out a continued ordinances, motions, whatever we need to do to have that complete control and power over it.
It sounds like a lot of the way that they've kind of internally labeled or organized their spending and their priorities. It's oh God, this is a problem. Holy crap, this is a problem, and sweet baby Jesus is a problem, and that doesn't seem like a very great way to do it, right?
Right. Yeah. Literally, their capital budget is on a spreadsheet, and it's kind of labeled. It's not literally labeled as this, but it's we kind of want to do this. We definitely need to do this, and then we really need to do this. But that is not how we do a capital budget, and so that is going to be the biggest change on how they're not prioritizing everything, and so that for us, especially. The district council members that really know their districts and what the issues are, we are able to tell them hey, this is what we're hearing on the ground, this is what needs to be a priority, and this is what keeps everybody safe from flooding and whatever. So it's really going to be that on the ground experience that is going to help us help them.
One thing that I actually have no idea what the answer to this question is, but I'm interested in is in a lot of the other areas in the city government, Mayor Moreno has been talking about trying to essentially make them public functions again. Stop relying on private contractors. How much does Sewer and Water Board rely on outside contracting to do its job at this point, I guess?
So that is an answer that we do not know the full answer to, but we are going to ask that question. We're going to have request a study of, kind of a redundancy of like, what work do you guys do contract? What do you have crews for? And look, I know when Steve Nelson was there, he had actually built up an in-house crew for Sewerage and Water Board to do some of that paving work. So I think, there are several things that they are doing in-house, probably better than us. And so how can we look at what they're doing and utilize that for the city's advantage too? So we're all working together, especially for that, service cut that everybody sees that takes forever to repair. If it's something that either DPW or Sewerage and Water Board can work together. So I think we're going to find several things like that where they have a contract, but they also have more people, and how can we utilize that, and vice versa.
It sounds like you guys are walking a little bit of a fine line with all this, though, because you're basically kind of taking over some of the functions, and then some of the functions you can't take over because you're going to need, I guess, the state and the charter changes and all of that to be sort of buying into that. But it also does you guys a little bit of a favor, right? Because there's all these financial issues. There's like a lot of debt that's on the books with them, for instance, and so you guys feels like you're keeping that at arm's length a little bit until you get the house in order. Is that?
Yeah, that's essentially it. It's going to take a little bit of time to figure out how things are running over there, because I think that's been the most frustrating thing, is that it's not very transparent because they haven't had to be transparent about what's happening. And we're not saying like there's anything, inherently bad going over there. It's just that we don't know. So if we don't know the full picture, just like why we're asking for an audit of their finances, we don't know the whole picture of how they've been spending their money, and whether or not it's been efficient, and what they have or have not spent money on that they said they were going to do. And so once we kind of get that like backbone of, all right, here's what's happening, here's how we can work together to make this a little bit better. And then, that's why you'll see it's a little bit slower than I think people are expecting. And that's why I want to keep telling people it's like not going to be a magic button. It's going to take some time. And there's urgency, but it's not going to be something that's quick.
On a really kind of related on infrastructure, I know you were one of like the first members to kind of jump on and get involved in like the lights, the city, like the street lights effort. And you and I have talked about this in the past, that like there is this opportunity to replace a lot of the wired street lights with solar lights, which makes it so that people don't try to steal the copper, which is good, right? And they work better, and it helps reduce the cost of the city. Is there an effort, or is there going to be an effort to try to expand that, you think, sort of into the broader parts of the city?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I know that when we did all the bridges, that was a big lighting thing that they did. I know that some of them were replaced with some of the solar powered lights. I think it's a matter of, at this point right now, we're in this budget crisis, obviously, still. So we're still trying to sort that out. But I know that it is a priority, and we've actually hired additional electricians in-house. I still think we're lacking on the workforce development piece, which you and I talked about before, and like really incorporating IBEW, our local union here, to help with an apprenticeship program, because we do need more electricians to be coming in. And also that's another part of it with Sewerage and Water Board, is that, there's an aging workforce, and if we don't have a plan of like how are we training the next generation to do these things, specifically with Sewerage and Water Board, but also with electricians and paving crews, that's got to be another priority that the city has.
It's kind of remarkable to me that that's been happening, because for decades and decades, a city job was what you wanted. I mean, that's kind of true everywhere, but in New Orleans especially, like, like a lot of musicians had it as their like kind of day job, and like everybody wanted that job. There was security in it. There was, you knew you're going to have a pension maybe, but you knew you had job security, and you knew it was going to be a good job, a well-paying job, and it does feel like people just don't even look at it like that anymore.
Yeah, and it's frustrating because I mean, obviously I think we do a great job with taking care of our employees. I mean, obviously right now people are furloughed and it's not the greatest, but people like working for the city, and I think there is that new sort of administration, you've got new leadership in here, and so we're making it pretty attractive to come and work for the city and still have those benefits, but also like making you feel like you're a part of the community, that you're improving the space that you live in. So I think that's huge, and I think we need to continue working towards that, because for every electrician that we have in-house, the more money that we can save and also provide an opportunity for somebody that works and lives here.
I feel like the city right now is like kind of looking at this budget crisis, right? And we all are kind of just in the middle of it, right? But looking back a little bit for just a minute, because I remember talking with you and with Joe and Helena and everybody, right? Like, shortly after this time last year when we found out there was a problem, and you were in the middle of budget stuff for years, and it was very clear that you guys had no idea that this was going on. What steps can you as the council take, or do you think that the council should take, frankly, to make sure this doesn't ever happen again? Not necessarily under Helena Moreno maybe, but like any future mayor where like we're not going to end up being like, here's an empty bag, see you later, right?
Right. Well, Council President Morell has introduced, this will be on your ballot in November. It's a measure where right now, once the council passes the budget, the administration can change it if they want to sometimes without changing it through council. So there's not a level of transparency. So this council, this agenda, this item on the proposition on the ballot, thank you, is going to allow us to lock the budget once it's passed. So that means like if the mayor or the administration needs to change something, or even the council, if we want to change something, it has to go through our council process, which would mean a budget ordinance, and it comes through the council's budget committee, and then it gets passed that way. So, and it's going to have the ability to actually see the changes within how that budget ordinance changes the budget. So that's one piece of it. And the other piece of it is we're going to be ordering some dashboards so the public can actually track how our budget is moving, because that's been something that I know Committee for Better New Orleans and some of those folks have been pushing, budget transparency. So that way there'll be another level of transparency around what our finances are doing. So the public can access it and know what's up. And
that'll be something where like it's kind of standardized language and it's plain language so that your average schmo, because I don't know how many years in a row I had to have you get on the phone with me to be like, this is what these words mean. They're in English and they don't make any sense to you. I get it. And that was always and I've covered budgets for 30 years and I still can't figure it out. So for your average person, it might as well be, Klingon, right?
Yes. It will have a full, and the council I think will do a full campaign about this, this ballot measure to make sure that everybody understands this is what it does, this is what will happen after that. And so to make it really clear that it's not just for this administration, but it's for future administrations, that we cannot have this situation where the administration is spending money without the council knowing, without the public knowing.
I know that the mayor has been very adamant, and Joe's been very adamant about the fact that they really think that they're going to have the budget crisis solved by the end of 2027. And that sounds like great. I would love for that to be true. I don't know that I believe that, right? As a budget nerd, right? Like realistically, do you think that that's possible?
I don't think so. I think we have at least another year of figuring out, because the problem is we haven't, we've got the sanitation fee that's out there that we've got to figure out if we're going to raise that or not. At some point, we're going to have to talk about whether we're rolling millages forward or not. And with that comes, if we don't roll millages forward, then what are we cutting and how can we, we're going to have to make some tough decisions. But I do think everybody knows that it's all hands on deck to try and figure out what can we do to make sure that we're not cutting services for residents, also not adding on more taxes and more, adding to the affordability crisis that we have here, so we're not continuing to lose population. So I think there are some tough decisions that we're going to have to make. I don't think that we have done everything in our power. For example, we haven't raised permit fees at safety and permits for a variety of things yet. So that's another stream of revenue. We haven't perfected how safety and permits runs to make sure we're processing those permits and getting that revenue in faster. So there's a lot of other steps that I feel like we're working on, but we haven't quite gotten there yet, that we need to get done in order for us to get out of this and make sure that we're being as efficient as possible without cutting services.
Do you support the raising the short-term rental fees?
Yes.
Good.
Yes,
Okay.
I do support that, and that goes into a separate fund that we can pay for with safety and permits can be on there, code enforcement. So yes, obviously, that's a big one, and it's an easy one that doesn't affect residents.
One thing that like a lot of folks will talk about, with safety and permits, obviously, is permitting and the pain in the ass that it is. Whether you want to open up, like essentially like a vendor someplace, to sell cold drinks or whatever, to opening up a brick and mortar shop selling goods or a technology thing or whatever. What are some things that you're looking at and that the council's maybe looking at doing in the next couple of months or year to help that?
Well, I think we're helping safety and permits. The new director, Susanna Kirby, she's right now figuring out what are the efficiencies we can do for stuff like that, and really for simple like building permits. I think there's some technology that we have not looked at yet to figure out and to assist the current safety and permits employees on how they can process those things faster. Like if it's a pretty simple permit like that, how can we get that process within like 3 days, if that's the goal, or a week? Like right now we're running on a lot of these things because we have very few people and they're looking at all kinds of different things and they're spending time on more complicated safety and permits items, which is understandable, but we've got to figure out a way that we can make it more efficient for people. So whether it's, I know that they're studying, how everything goes through the process of permitting and like finding out where in the process are we getting those delays and figuring out whether it's a person thing or if it's an efficiency thing where we've got to have some kind of technology that can help them understand and process these things faster.
Along the same lines, I know that you and Jason obviously have been doing a lot of the work on the Sewerage Water Board thing, and one thing that has come up in our reporting, particularly on Decatur Street, but kind of as a result of Decatur Street, is that a lot of people in town think that like at some point the city needs to just bite the bullet and say, until we know for sure that Sewer and Water Board is fixed and isn't going to be resulting in like months and years delays and problems for businesses and for residents, that the city should figure out ways to help those people, right? Whether it's you can't park in front of your house because the street has been destroyed for a year, or people can't get to your business, because the street's been destroyed for a year. Is that something that you guys are looking at into like sort of like the model of like helping the businesses on Decatur, but to make that a bigger thing for the city, like when these projects come up and like it's obvious it's going to be an issue for a long time?
Yeah, I think it's both that we need to figure out if there is going to be if we know that there's going to be an infrastructure project that's going to take as long as Decatur did, then we need to figure out how we're going to make sure that those residents and those businesses are not affected, on a daily basis, and figure out what does the city need to do to help with that. The other part of that, I think, is having the infrastructure coordinating council. This is something that we talked about, during Super Bowl, they had this council that got everything done fast, and we did all this construction, and that was because you had everybody sitting at a table doing that. So the mayor has created that group, and I've been, every 5 weeks, I get to go in and sit and talk about like what projects are going on in my district, but also talk with the council to see how they're doing. And so I think having that will inherently help us move through some of these bigger projects a little bit faster and more efficiently. And I do wish like we had that before the Decatur project, because it just, they were like, it's going to take a year, and I just feel like it wasn't looked at hard enough to see like there's got to be some better ways to do this and more efficiencies. Even if it is FEMA and there are certain rules and regulations around that, it shouldn't matter. We should be able to figure out how we can coordinate that in a faster way. And so I think it's both, we need to plan better for those longer term things, but also having the infrastructure coordinating council is the whole purpose of having these things move along a little bit faster. So it's less on residents and businesses.
You mentioned the Super Bowl, and while I've not been a huge fan of the idea of bringing the Super Bowl to town, I've been very vocal about that because of, especially when we saw what happened with folks in town. I mean, everywhere in town, really, honestly, we kind of took a bath on it. Whereas we were promised, everybody was going to be walking around with golden cigars, and we ended up getting nothing. And, obviously there's already sort of talk begun about bringing it back again. I feel like a lot of the businesses, particularly in the quarter, but everywhere, really feel like, there's some basic things the city should be demanding of them. For instance, that businesses can't bring in their own bartenders, they can't bring in their own, musicians, things like that. Like what, obviously you're not going to be making the final decision on it, but the council will be helping make these calls. Can you commit to people that like you're gonna, not just let them come and run roughshod like they did this last time? And
yeah,
what kind of things do you think that they should be doing to help
Yeah, I think the, I guess it's the Sugar Bowl or Super Bowl committee that makes these decisions along with the state. But I think we do need to make sure that the council has a say in that, because I know that our small businesses really, and this is my problem sometimes with economic development in general, like it never ends up trickling down to the people that are like working and living here. And so we have to figure out, I think it's our council's role to ensure that anything that we are bringing here as far as economic development or otherwise, that it is actually helping the people that are living and working here. Because so time and time again, people hear like, oh, it's going to bring in money and it's going to bring in money, and then it never matriculates. And so we do have to make sure that if we are going to have another Super Bowl, how can we work with the NFL and those partners to say, look, no, we're going to do it this way, and you guys, once you've selected us, like we have to do it this way in order for our businesses to actually see, the outcome of having this great event. And it's not that we don't want this event; we just want it to trickle down to everybody that's living here and making it the best that can be. And that's, if you want to come down to New Orleans for our culture, then you should be paying for it in the proper way.
Right. So your district, when I first started reporting on New Orleans, was described to me as like essentially like this it was just rich white conservative Republicans, right? And my experience is that that's not at all true. There obviously are conservative rich white Republicans in your district, obviously, but it's a much more diverse district. And politically, it seems that like at a bare minimum, it has changed over the last 10 years.
Yeah.
What do you make of that? What do you think is the result of that? And I guess, what is your assessment of where your district is right now?
Yeah, I think it's always kind of been that like, District A is like the conservative district. And I think, over time in general, just in New Orleans in general is a blue city. And I think even though you have pockets of red, I think everybody, especially at the council level, we all have the same issues, whether it's streets, streetlights, the basic stuff that doesn't see a red or a blue behind them. They see like, hey, we just want our streets fixed, And so I think politically, it has gotten a little bit more moderate to like more progressive. And you've got some progressive pockets in the Uptown Carrollton area, Holly Grove area, even in Lakeview, we have us out here. But I think, in general, when it comes to specifically city politics, there isn't an R or a D. It's everybody has the same goals. Everybody wants the basic services, and everybody kind of knows that we as a council don't really deal with some of the bigger issues at the state or at the federal level that really have that partisanship. And I think that's why you've seen that shift, even though it is sort of more conservative than the rest of the city. People understand that like that isn't going to get them anywhere at city politics, because we all want the same things.
So I'm asking all of the council members, and ask Elena this question. You happen to be the only white person that I'm going to be asking this question of. So I'm going to ask it a little different. In the last year, we have seen an erosion of black political power in this country, purposely done by the federal government and by the Attorney General of the state and by the governor of the state. Here, we have seen efforts to, take over the city. Like there's a clear assault on black political power going on right now. And you are the white woman city council member in a majority black city. That puts you in sort of a potential, like a different position, I think, than maybe some of the other members potentially. I'm curious to know what do you see is your role, in these kind of fights and in this kind of a climate? Yeah,
I mean, I think that I represent still a city that is majority black, and I understand that. And especially in my district, we have Holly Grove neighborhood, we've got some of Gertown, Pigeontown, so we've got a lot of that diversity in my district too. And so I do see it, and I that's part of the reason why I was so outspoken about, the Calvin Duncan situation, because I do see that coming down from the state, and it is problematic, and it goes against, my values and how I feel about how the city should work. And, that's why I feel like it is my place to also make sure that I'm making sure that those voices are heard. And I want to be an ally to make sure that, I've got their back too. It's not like a, thing for me. It's not something that should be happening at the state level. And that's why I felt so strongly about, Calvin and I had a lot of campaign overlap we waved signs together, and it was, important for me to have him in that seat. And I think that's why we fought so hard about what was happening at the state level, and that's why we had to speak out about it. And I think that's just going to be how I go forward, is that these are my values, and nobody's going to take that away from me, and that's just how it's going to be.
Okay. Well, last question for you. Looking forward now, 6 months from now, what are your top 3 or 4 kind of priority items outside of Sewer and Water Board?
Okay, outside of Sewerage and Water Board, obviously we've got a couple of things on the climate calendar. On the climate committee, we have community solar, which is going to be hopefully on the ground at the end of this year. We have the Sisters Dwyer Road project at a big community solar project out in the New Orleans East. So people will be able to subscribe to that and actually, get credits on their Entergy bills. So that's something that's very exciting, because that will help not just New Orleans East, but the city as a whole. Because the project is out there, we have said, you guys need to make sure you're outreaching to those neighbors there. And then we have our community power plant. It's called a virtual power plant. It's very complicated, but it can also help save money on electricity bills. That'll be a docket that's coming out soon too. The other part of it is with Entergy is their reliability issues. I think we, the council, and I in particular, have been pretty outspoken about that, because I think it was when I did the latest calculation of the power outage that we've had since the beginning of the year. It's 120,000 hours or something like that have been out. So that means we have not had a day that has gone by where someone's power has been out. And so that could mean 10 people are out to 10,000 people. And that's a problem, because Entergy will also always be well, it's not that many people. But you know what? Those 10 people, especially in New Orleans East, where you have an more elderly population, or Gentilly, where people are relying on, their machines to help them breathe, that sort of thing, that could mean life or death for people. So we did have that reliability resolution that came out last meeting, and that's going to require Entergy to do some work and show us how much they're spending on their regular operations, because they're underspending by a vast amount, and ratepayers are already paying that. So that's going to be one thing that I think is going to be really important. The other part of that is that we've asked our advisors to give us some guidance on bill credits. So when your power does go out, that you can, just like Cox or AT&T, if your internet service is out for a certain amount of time, they just credit your bill.
Right.
But Entergy doesn't do that, because we've never ordered them to do that. So now we have asked our advisors to let us know, how can we actually do that? What is the right amount of time that your power is out, or number of times that your power goes out before you get a bill credit? Because I think it's super important that our grid is reliable, not just during hurricanes, but on a daily basis.
Right,
because a day like today, if your power's out and you can't have your air conditioning on, it's really hot.
Yes.
And people could, die or go to the hospital. So it's super important. So those are the biggest things I think that are priorities for me, other than Sewerage and Water Board, obviously. And then, obviously the budget. However we can be transparent and work together with the administration on that budget situation is a top priority too.
Well, look, I appreciate you coming in and talking to me.
Yeah, of course, anytime.